He's the Executive Director, Head of Strategy and Human Resource Consulting at PwC. He is the person who did the SLASSCOM Compensation and Benefits Survey report. He's been doing it over the years. He'll share some insights from that, followed by a panel discussion later on. So without much ado, Lasana, can I invite you to the floor?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Namita, for the introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here and to be invited to speak to you at this morning breakfast meeting. And I think when you talk about talent, I think there's never a dull moment in when looking at talent, especially in the current context and when you're looking at what's been happening over the last couple of years in particular. I mean, working across industries, you see talent-related themes front and center when it comes to growth, expansion. We've been looking at trying to bring investors into the country, including companies in the IT BPM space, and we're looking at companies who are looking at expansion now. And one of the key drivers is talent and looking for quality talent and capacity to expand. So I think sort of looking at some of those topics that, as Sean mentioned, we had carried out a study back in the fourth quarter of last year. Primary purpose was the compound study for IT BPM industry, but as part of that, we looked at some of the pay practices and talent trends that were in play within the IT BPM industry. So if you look at sort of the broader scope of what we covered and what was in the report that's available in SLASSCOM, we looked at the demographic sort of the trends in the IT BPM space around the talent recruitment, especially around entry-level talent, around internship programs, and companies that try to sort of absorb interns into the industry. And then also some of the quantitative areas, like looking at the trends around staff attrition, increment levels, and especially, I think when we looked at last year, the measures company had put in place to sort of manage economic challenges and sort of the distress that the staff were going through with higher the cost of living, etc. So a lot of that quantitative stuff were actually presented in the report. So over the next 25 minutes, I think what my task is to kind of give you some of the key highlights that sort of came out of that study. But also I will share some additional sort of feedback on some of the subsequent discussions I had with the industry and some of the companies that participated in the survey, kind of see how their experience has been in the first half of this year and whether sort of things went according to plan and whether there had been some any course correction. So let me just touch on those as we go, and I think later on there is a panel discussion where these things might be sort of discussed and there will be time for Q&A as well. So I'll just move on. So in terms of the demography profile, one thing we've sort of seen last year was that the overall industry workforce that amongst the participants, so we had 35 companies who participated in the survey, and the workforce within those companies had increased by 11% in 2022. And the good thing was that they were optimistic about the industry and they were planning for expansion and growth. So if you take like the industry itself, they were looking at 25% growth, so approximately 3,500 net new hires that they were looking to absorb into those companies. And overall, IT BPM companies were looking at about 3,500 new hires. And these are just from the 65 companies we serve. So obviously, the overall population would probably be much larger than that. And we also saw sort of a notable improvement in the diversity. So historically, overall industry, the female representation was about 34%, but we've seen it grow up to about 39% last year. And especially in the IT industry, we've seen a notable increase from 29% to 35% female representation. The BPM industry has been more or less stable around 1 to 1, with a plus or minus 1 or 2% change year on year. And another notable feature was that when you look at the age profile of the workforce, the BPM industry naturally had a larger proportion of the younger workforce. And I think we related that also to when we looked at the entry requirements that were sort of sought by the IT companies versus the BPM, where about 90% of the IT companies looked at the minimum of a degree qualification and the minimum entry requirement, whereas in the BPM side, there were 55 to 60% that was looking at a minimum maybe A-level qualification with some part qualification in other professional streams. So I think that kind of skewed the younger workforce in the BPM and kind of explain that observation. When it came to staff turnover, I think this is something that is still a big issue across multiple sectors, but more so in IT, especially because of the sort of global mobility in the IT workforce. We've seen a notable increase in the attrition levels over the last in 2022. So historically, if you look back when we were doing these studies from 9 years or even more than 5 years, we had the high 20s attrition levels, but over the last few years, it had actually improved to the mid-teens. But in 2022, we've sort of seen a reversal of that. Average staff attrition went back up to 23% in the IT sector, and BPM sector, which has always been relatively higher to the IT sector, had increased up to 32%. Overall, if you look at absolute numbers, that some of the companies, these went up to sort of the mid-40s. So overall, there was an increase in the attrition. But when we looked at, or when I've spoken to some of the companies, post 2022 or the first quarter of this year, I think some of the feedback was that some of this attrition, the rate of attrition, has slowed down in the recent past. Of course, last month there have been some companies who indicated that it started to pick up again, but generally it has stabilized over what was observed in 2022. Whether it's temporary or whether it will sort of continue, I think it's something that companies are keen to look at, and that's one of the challenges when they're looking at the retention strategies and pay strategies, as per the discussions we've had. In terms of the main reasons for attrition, and one notable change was that previously looking at better pay opportunities or better work opportunities was the main reason for staff attrition, but migration has overtaken all of that to become the sort of predominant reason for attrition. And we also note that people have been leaving outside of IT industry, so the normal corporates, as well as people leaving companies just to be freelancers and working directly with foreign companies while based in Sri Lanka as other reasons for staff attrition. And if you look at IT and IT companies, the main reasons for attrition are pretty much consistent with the overall sort of the reasons around noted here. But if you take the BPM companies, there were some additional reasons also that we found that amongst the top 5. So 2 of them were that people left for lack of career growth opportunities. I think that's an area that really perhaps is a focus for companies to look at how to provide those career advancement opportunities. And another reason was that people just took career breaks, and that was a bit of a reason amongst the BPM sector companies. So to manage this attrition, what companies have, historically the practice has been to sort of promote the corporate image, the brand, the technology exposure, and those have been USPs that companies still continue to use to sort of attract and retain talent. But increasingly over the last 12 months and even this year, flexible work arrangements and especially variable pay practices have been some of the practical attributes that also initiatives that are being in use to attract talent as well as to retain talent. And I'll go into some of the aspects of that in the following slides. So in terms of flexible work, what we've seen is that there are about 64% of the companies that have formal flexible work policies drafted and in place. But there's a growing number of companies who have mentioned that they're intending to develop the policies in 2023. But regardless of policies, there was a larger majority, so 81% of companies practicing some form of remote work, flexible work arrangements. And the most common means were through remote working or flexible hours for staff. But there was an increasing trend, especially I think to attract some of the people who were leaving to take career breaks in the industry, and also to attract some of the female workforce. I think people looking at offering part-time opportunities to attract women back into the workforce. And also, I think there were several companies who noted that people are leaving not for their own reason, but because maybe the spouse is migrating. So they are looking at opportunities to provide, work from anywhere kind of options where, people who still wanted to remain with the company, but leaving for other reasons, had the option to kind of still continue providing and working with those companies. There was a small minority of companies who had gone into 100% remote working, and these are generally the smaller companies. And another small minority, less than 10%, who had sort of after the initial sort of lockdowns and everything had gone reverted back to sort of full-time work. But I think there's been increasing sort of challenges in getting people back in office, and I think that's something that globally outside in the sea we hear about something from the large tech companies trying to respect that remote working policy. So when we look at the flexible work practices, again in line with the policies and the practices that they encourage remote working, other companies have also been providing financial incentives to support those flexible work practices. So the common ways have been companies have introduced data allowances or reimbursement of certain expenses like utility expenses, data costs, or sometimes giving one-time sort of cost reimbursement to set up home offices as to support the flexible or remote work practices. And there's increasing number of companies who are not already providing such financial incentives who intended to do so in 2023. But companies recognize that this flexible working, sort of remote working, is becoming a challenge. I think some of the issues that were noted were, for one thing, the lack of sort of emotional attachment to the organization and sort of the colleagues, so that so some of the USPs that companies have today kind of built up around the workplace, the culture, the environment. I think people are feeling detached from all that, and that also then kind of leads to an easy decision that people can, leave in the company. So I think companies are really looking at, how do we engage with employees more, and how do we kind of bring that team culture and sort of that people physically interact more. So those are some of the things that companies were grappling with, and there are initiatives that have been taken to address that, which are much later. There were also concerns about the mental well-being, how people can sort of separate their work life from home life when they're working from home. And an increasing focus has been also on the wellness aspect, and that's a trend that we've seen increasingly becoming prevalent across all companies. So there are challenges with companies who wanting to continue this flexible work arrangement, and they're looking at how to mitigate some of those as well. As I said, so there are multiple ways companies have been supporting the wellness initiative. Most common practices have been where they have organized wellness initiatives and seminars, especially getting external experts to come and talk about best practices and well-being practices, lifestyle changes within the company. But companies have also been supporting financially for people to get external counseling, external help, and also expanding their insurance arrangements or reimbursement practices to sort of cover where you can go and get external counseling or psychiatric treatment, etc. And sort of another trend that we've noted is that companies are expanding the coverage of some of these well-being offerings, so not just the staff, but some of their extended families, like family, the spouse and children, and also the broader family, like parents, where I think for some people those are important considerations and USPs that have some resonated from people. I think among some of the other interesting things that we've seen this in other non-tech companies as well, is sort of the gamification of wellness, creating internal competitions and challenges to sort of engage in physical activity and creating sort of competition within teams. So again, it's a team building engagement initiative as well. So basically, wellness and engagement are sort of being combined together rather than separately, sort of branding everything as wellness. And one thing we noted was that despite a lot of the initiatives that companies are embarking on, they are not marketing it and using it as a sort of a USP to attract or sort of promote the workplace. And perhaps that's an opportunity for companies to, differentiate or sort of attract or sort of, retain talent. So I think there's opportunity there for companies who are doing interesting stuff to kind of brand it and sort of make it more outside. So I think all of us know back from around March last year, there's the economic hardships that a lot of us went through, and a lot of companies had started introducing various initiatives to sort of help the staff mitigate some of the impacts of the economic hardship. So, amongst a lot of schemes like temporary one-off schemes, financial incentives, and sort of aid support that was provided. I think one common theme that came up was that 64% of the companies we spoke to had introduced some form of pay to variable pay, so whether it's sort of a currency pay or whether it was linked to inflation. It varied the sort of predominant sort of popular option was the currency pegged variable scheme. A number of companies have sort of used that as a sort of means to provide additional sort of financial sort of incentive for staff as well as to sort of help them manage sort of high inflation. And the IT companies, we know that had a higher proportion. 70% of the IT companies actually had implemented such variable pay schemes, whereas proportionately a number of BPM companies had introduced that. So if you take the companies that had 100% or a significant share of their revenue generated from export sales, we know that 25% of those companies still didn't actually implement those kind of variable pay schemes. And sometimes the larger companies didn't do that because the cost of doing that was sort of fairly significant. So companies that didn't sort of go into such variable pay practices and kind of this strategies they adapted were more frequent increments rather than one increment. They would add 3 or 4 increments during the year, and also giving one-off bonuses or sort of ad hoc budgetary relief, sort of financial payments for some of the strategies that were adopted by those companies who didn't go into the sort of pegged variable pay schemes. And there are also differentiations we noted between different staff levels. So in certain cases, the junior staff or people whose pay levels so below a certain level had a higher share of their salary in sort of the variable pay schemes, whereas as they moved up the sort of the organization hierarchy, the variable component was sometimes a lesser amount. And there are certain cases where decisions were made between different teams as well, depending on if you're doing client support work or sort of more operational back office support work as well. We see sort of subtle differences between the pay practices. And another scheme that companies have also been using is to create internal projects or sort of working with groups like on sort of cross-border projects with teams from different territories to give the employees opportunity to sort of earn additional income where they couldn't absorb the cost locally or where there wasn't a justifiable means to sort of give sort of some additional incentive or financial payments to local staff, so especially for critical staff or certain teams that had critical skills, to sort of give them the opportunity to earn that extra money. So I think in connected with that variable pay scheme and variable practices, we've seen sort of how the increments have sort of fared over 2022. So if you look at the company 40%, and this is an increase from about 15% that we observed last year. And for the BPM sector, it was about 20%, 19.5%, where it was 10% in 2021. And most of these companies have budgeted for 2023 when it comes to increments were in the 15 to 16% range. Although there were sort of large variations within that, especially companies that were using pegging had increment levels sometimes going up to the 40s to 60% range. And we also know that companies that had pegging, so typically companies that had pegged salaries versus non-pegged companies, there was a sort of a maybe coincidence, but all of the increment levels are almost double. So the IT companies that didn't have pegged salaries in 2022 had average increment levels of 30%, whereas the pegged companies, the average increment was 15% and it was 24% for BPM companies, whereas the pegged BPM companies with pegged salaries, the average was about 12% last year. And we are seeing the same difference. Companies are budgeted for in 2023, but the difference is not as large. So if you take IT companies, the pegged companies were budgeting around 14%, whereas the non-pegged companies were budgeting around 18%. So it's the sort of the difference is much smaller than the sort of double, 2 times the sort of increment level we've seen last year. And having spoken to companies who have already, so most of these companies have had their annual increment cycles in March, April, and we spoke to a few companies to understand whether they actually gave the increments as they planned, and the general consensus has been by far they've been giving increments as per budget, but there have also been salary scale revisions and adjustments that have been happening over time as well. And an expectation is that the companies who have some of their review cycles happening in June, July, or thereafter, what we saw as average increment would be about 10 to 15% from the more recent updates that from the companies we've spoken to. So, looking at 2023, and I think if you look at what companies were thinking back in the last quarter last year and what we've seen today this year, I think there have not been any major differences from my knowledge. In general, companies have been trying to reduce the extent of this variable pay. There are about 40% of the companies who have said that they want to continue with the variable pay schemes, but they want to reduce the proportion of the pay that is subject to the variable pay. So what companies have been doing is rebasing the sort of the base value so that your tech component is a lower proportion of overall pay, but where the overall pay is still comparable to the previous numbers or an increasing trend. And also, some companies have wanted to move away from the stability sort of pay that's linked to sort of exchange rates or inflation to more performance-linked pay. And I think that's something that we've seen increasingly, that they want to tie it to some performance measure and give that as a variable component rather than just looking at exchange rates. And especially, I think over the last quarter, we'll be appreciating a little bit. Companies have said that the traction of that variable pay has diminished to some extent, and some employees have been sort of complaining about it. But in general, they say that these have been disclosed as well, said that volatility is there, and they expect that the dollar will depreciate towards the latter half, so that some of those concerns might not be relevant going forward in the second half. In terms of some of the other practices that are less publicized, but I think companies are looking at and trying to explore is trying to look at legitimate ways to sort of avoid some part of the salary in foreign currency. There are some companies who are already doing that by, especially where people have sort of regional roles or they're part of group, sort of multinational, sort of group companies where they have the capacity to, give some responsibility at a regional level or something, and then give part of the pay directly from a parent company overseas. But even in the last year and this year, there are a number of companies who have limited exposure to foreign markets who weren't able to go to the big scheme in the first place. And even some companies who are sort of more standalone companies who don't have that capacity to pay through related companies overseas where they're looking at other needs. And so some companies are having some other parts of the paid directly by clients where their employees are engaged in certain projects, client related projects. So those are some schemes that people are looking to give additional incentives for people. And some of these are looking at across the board, but for critical people within the organization and senior level staff. I think the topic that has been of much discussion has been around the taxes and what we do with that. Last year, when we did this survey, we just had a proposal stage. A lot of companies were still looking to see what will go about it, but general indication, about 25% of the companies have implemented that. They intended to increase allowances or give some incentives to sort of offset the impact of the increase in payroll, the personal taxes. When we had those discussions with some companies, after this was implemented in the last couple of months, what we've seen is that yes, there are some companies who have introduced additional allowances, travel allowances, or in non-cash forms like giving fuel cards or to compensate some element of the additional tax burden. And some companies are looking at performance-linked schemes which will directly offset the impact of the taxes that employees are going to have to pay. But there are companies, especially multinational companies, who have said it's not something they actively encourage or something they will be looking at, but something they may consider when they look at increments, and although not directly linked to taxes, when they look at the increment levels, that may be a factor that they have to consider when they look at sort of the trends around attraction and what they hear from the market. So by far, I think companies are still adapting wait and see and sort of short-term strategies to sort of manage the issues around pay and manage attrition and retention issues. But also increasingly, companies are looking at improving the employer value proposition. So rather than just purely focusing on pay and pay-related things, I think creating that whole value proposition around experience, giving opportunities to work on global projects and get that exposure even while staying in the country. And also sort of the diversity, the workflows and various other attributes to sort of enhance that sort of the self-fulfilled satisfaction for employees. And that's where I think companies that we've seen locally as well as in other countries who are facing similar issues, talent issues or in IT space. Those are areas that companies are focusing, but you can't necessarily win the battle just fighting on pay itself without ultimately the industry as a whole. So those are some of the things that we have sort of observed as trends in 2023. I think there might be a few other things that we can talk about, or happy to take any Q&As when we have the final discussions. But that's pretty much sort of the highlights I want to share from the survey that we did last year. And hopefully we'll try to do a pulse survey and talk about sometime in the middle of this year, share some action insight to see how things are doing. And perhaps we'll talk to SLASSCOM about that as well. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nasandra, for the insights into the current workforce and what's happening. So just to reiterate, this is an annual survey that we do. The more companies that take the survey, the better the information is that we gather from it. So please, when it comes out, we encourage all of you all to get your companies to do the survey. And it's a report that is published and is available for purchase. So for more details, if you have not purchased it, the current report is available. I think The survey will be rolling out in October, so please watch out for that and subscribe to it. So that was some great information on the workforce. Now let's go into, we need to improve and increase our workforce for us to continue to grow. SLASSCOM has a lot of initiatives that we are doing on that. I'd like to invite our chairman, Ashik Ali, to speak more about the different initiatives that we have currently running. Over to you, Ashik.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all of you here. So one of the things that I want to address during today's brief talk is that a lot of what we do don't really percolate to the membership, and more importantly to the workforce membership. And this is a huge challenge that we have in terms of comms. And most often, when we engage with individual companies in our member connect, or sometimes I do personal visits as well. A lot of the communication, a lot of the initiatives that we do, even at the highest level in the companies, they are not aware. And when we speak about it, that's when the balls start getting rolling, and they volunteer a few people into some of the initiatives, and then we see some engagement. From SLASSCOM side, we are trying to better that communication. We designed weekly highlights. We used a communication expert trying to minimize information and make it more, what can I say, browse friendly. We have redesigned our newsletter. We're trying to reduce the number of emails that are going out so that you don't see this as too many emails coming from SLASSCOM. We want to rationalize, and post-COVID, we are now going to start doing a lot more member engagement activities, physical activities. Breakfast event is one such thing, but there are more to come. We are going to have the Mega Mind Quiz show coming in. We are going to have a CEO retreat. Few things so that we build that personal engagement with the leadership in the industry. So just to move on, I will just move with some of the slides which we are familiar with, but I will set the context as we go along. So many numbers keep floating. Nishan and I have the unenviable task of trying to ground this as to what it is. Even from the government, they keep asking, what is this number, what is that number? As it stands, we are reporting $1.7 billion of export revenue in 2022. How this is made up is very, very conservative. We've taken the workforce numbers, which we have provided accurately, the employment numbers. We have a very accurate number on the salaries, the cost. And if costs make up 70 to 80% of costs, then we arrive at what might be the total cost, right? And then we are taking the transfer price rule of 10% as a minimum, even if you are captive operating on a cost plus model. That's the number that is there. But I personally think with product companies having a higher margin, with Sri Lankan export companies having a higher margin, we are above $2 billion, right? But the central bank still continues to report us close to $1 billion because they also rely on a survey of a very small set of companies, and I don't think that's coming out. So one of the key things was that SLASSCOM needs to own this space. Madhu is sitting here, has been preaching this and hammering it on my head that who puts the data out first and owns that and rationalizes that becomes a norm. Point taken, we have now prepared that, and what we are doing is at every annual general meeting, which comes in the end of June, there's going to be a standard publication from SLASSCOM, like a state of industry report, which will give the employment stats, the revenue stats, etc. And hopefully over a period of time, this will become the go-to source for this information. Moving on, again very controversial, $5 billion target, we are at 2023, people keep asking how are you going to hit this when you are at 1.7 billion. So where did the $5 billion come from? That's an aspirational target, but where did it come from? So when we sat for MES strategy back in 2017, 2018 with ITC, right, there were two tracks in which this came about. It was not the number that we plucked from. So we had the standard organic growth of 13-14% CAGR that would get us to 3 billion. That was the trajectory that the industry was going on. Obviously, this was pre-COVID. Industry didn't have some of the challenges that we had. Then we came up with this whole program called the Exponential Growth Company Program. The government actually put some money behind it. Where we could identify close to about 70 companies in the tech space, which had a very high potential of growing probably 5 to 10x, right? And give them both financial support as well as other support to be able to achieve that high growth. And we, in fact, chose about 14 companies, and this program actually got underway. But we are a country full of surprises and turns. Obviously, in 2018, we had the whole political issue with the executive and the legislature. Then the whole budget went for a toss in 2018 November. So the successive fund for 2019 didn't happen. Then Easter bomb attack. Then come March 2020, we had the COVID. So one step up, and then 2022, the whole system came down, right? Having said that, if we are at $2+ billion, I am optimistic that with the type of interest, with the number of companies that are coming even during 2022 and the beginning of 2023, we will hit that 3 billion target by 2025. That's 2 years, we are 1.5 year runway, and I think there is a good possibility that we will run. But in 2025, we need to still work very hard on this. This will come from companies here really pushing the envelope and taking on the growth. Number one, that means going beyond the shows. A lot of our startup scale-up are still not getting out there. Number two, some policy issues are there because a large part of these startup scale-ups are now setting up shop outside of Sri Lanka because of various policy regulations, and they are booking revenue outside of Sri Lanka, right? So they are only operating on a cost-plus model. So all that high-geared exponential growth is not coming into Sri Lanka; it's primarily going into Singapore and Dubai. So we will actually get that revenue on in terms of dollars here. The other part is that the MNCs or the foreign captives to set up here. There again, we need to do a lot of groundwork considering the reputation damage that happened last year. How do you build confidence and a positive outlook for the industry for them to set up in Sri Lanka? The workforce numbers, I think, should be alright because as industry, as of now, we have the demand, but I will come to that later in my slides as well. As it stands, the 144,000 breakup is 107,000 in IT and 37,000 in BPM. We have that broken down into certain skills as of 2019 workforce skills survey, but these circles that you see the pie chart, this needs to change because over a 4-year period, this skills profile has completely changed because of emerging tech taking a lot more traction, a lot more adoption, and the global demand has moved from this. So we need to revisit this. What we SLASSCOM does is that we do the once in 2 years skills survey, now we're trying to make it annual skills survey, where we actually do look at the qualitative aspects of what technologies, what platforms, what languages, we deep dive into the whole tech stack to see what are those in-demand skills for the next 18 months and what companies project as a more longer term. This is really important for us because this is what we need to feed back into the capacity building system, which are universities. And we all know around these tables that that's a slow and arduous process. Right? You can't go and change curriculums or introduce anything new into it, and even if it is a 4-year cycle. So we need to take a much longer term view and give industry feedback into this. And Lasanga touched upon the attrition. yes, we are seeing the rate of attrition coming down, but I personally go into universities and do a lot of these talks. In the last 5 university engagements that I've done since November 2022, if you ask the students about their outlook, what do they see as the future post-graduation, a majority of them, there is an intent to leave the country. They don't see a future here, right? Even though we say there are opportunities, either they want to pursue higher education outside, or they see that there are job opportunities or living conditions much better outside than in Sri Lanka. We need to build that trust again with them. By the way, this decks we can share, right? It's nothing proprietary here. We also deep dive into the university system, right? With the UGC as well as there's an institute organization called SLASSCOM. So we look at the complete landscape, and this is currently being updated as we speak. What are their intakes and what are their outputs on an annual basis, right? So currently we are standing close to about 30,000 graduate output in only the IT technology streams. But as we move along to 2025, that number will go to 18,000 or more. I will explain what it is. But now what we are doing is we are looking at some of these technologies areas where we need to build specific talent. Although most of the universities focus on 3 general degrees, computer science, software engineering and IT, they are covering modules inside of those and giving various levels of credits for specific technologies. So now we are going deep dive into all the universities and building how many of these credits, so that we can give a much better profile of each degree program as to what they are covering and what are the numbers that are coming. Very important, because when we take on captive who want to set up here or investor calls, this is a key question. You know, if I want AI, where do I go? Right? How many are being produced by the universities? If I want something on blockchain or any cyber security, these are questions that we want to have granular data. Broadly, what we do is we are influencing careers, we are creating awareness as to what good careers are available in the industry. We are working on the quality, just not just the number, but we are wanting to influence the quality very, very deeply with the engagement. Then we are also looking at how do you bring scale the university systems, right, both private and public, as well as other tertiary organizations, giving them the demand focus. Some of them are doing it for commercial reasons, but keeping the quality in mind. And lastly, we are also looking at non-traditional sources of talent into the industry. Right? All this, then we look at whether we are bridging the employability gap, whether they have the right skills, then also more importantly language and professional skills as well. So this is something I want to go a little bit deeper. So we are not, in many industries they are just looking at readily available talent and wanting to hire, right? And then certainly now some segments of our companies just want that. Most of the investors are always looking for ready to employ talent, but that's not going to happen, right? We need somebody who needs to do the whole development part, and this is where SLASSCOM is having interventions right from the school all the way to all the higher education, right? And these were originally started, it's not started just now, these were started almost 5-6 years ago, right? With a lot of donor support, etc., as pilots and proof of concepts, and now we are seeing all of these have gained a lot of traction and the numbers are looking bigger. I will come to a later slide down the newest initiative, the National Future Talent Initiative, where they are trying to take this at a very high national scale. So keep take this program, go into the school, create code clubs. We are working with the Ministry of Education, influence the kids to look at Scratch programming and microbit and things like that. Not just, and the whole thing is just for them not to get into coding careers, but actually develop problem solving, critical thinking, those kind of things. And it lines up with the government's modernizing education program as well. Eventually this will come. I think SLASSCOM has taken a far sooner step in this, right? And we are seeing schools, surprisingly, teachers, parents, and school administration really wanting to do this. So the barriers are coming down. Then we move on to the bridge. This is what we created originally for the A-level pool of students who don't get access to university education, right? How do you get them into the industry? But the program has seen so much of success now. The university first year, all the universities, their first year program is using this as an assessment, right? Including module, right? So that speaks to the credibility. Again, it's very industrialized skills. It gives a good flavor to the graduates. What are the type of career tracks that are available for them, and what type of problems that they will encounter in this. So it's really grounding academic program into what the industry skills require. It sets the stage for it. So thereafter, the boot camps and everything kind of enriches them in further deep down skills. So again, there are now close to about 30,000 students right across the country. There is a national leaderboard. Companies are connected to that, and they can see the progress of the students. It's fully verified. And on top of that, we are building the boot camps and the professional skills, encouraging students to further their skills there. And when they join an internship program or whatever, they get access to finance through the banks or through scholarships, and they can pursue higher education. Then, encompassing all that. So last March, I think we had a roundtable here with the industry folks, mostly on the talent leads and HRs, looking at what is the lowest hanging fruit here, right? And that's the graduate pool. The graduate pool, the readily hireable are close to about 15-20%, right? Everybody else, you need serious work on before they can be onboarded. Companies spend typically 4 to 6 to 8 months doing this. So in a very adverse climate, this becomes a very difficult thing, especially with mid-tier staff leaving companies. They are the ones who are anchoring this talent within companies. And how do you do this? Right? COVID also posed a lot of these challenges. How do you do this on a virtual mode? So what Graduate Careers program is envisaging to do, and it's already now rolled out with 5 universities, is that we get into all these programs, a lot of lessons learned, which we can actually do it inside the university and move this whole thing from industry reliant to the university reliant one, right? We move it right into that. So from year 2 onwards, year 1 we let them settle down. Anyway, the university is using the career bridge to align them. But year 2 onwards, this is where we go in, we do industry talks, mentorships, co-delivery of certain lecture programs. We're doing industry-led projects. We're shifting the industrial placement which are in year 3 to year 4 so that students don't have to, especially in the state universities, full degree programs, students don't have to go back into the university. They actually can continue in the industry. So anyone who gave the company which gave the internship can retain them and offer them the employment thereafter. So this is the G2C program, Graduate Careers, where we are looking at year 2, 3, and 4, where we will bring a graduate out of that much more readily employable than what it is today. And we are starting that on year 2 by the first step in this is to create a LinkedIn profile for all these students, right? And you've got a badging system now, LinkedIn badging system. So all this is now adding into their CVs from year 2 onwards. So what we are telling them is your CV is going to look like this in year 4. You don't have to take a standard templatized CV which we see on one page with all these skill matrix and all. No, this is real stuff, right? And that's what's going to happen for you on year 4 when you actually sit across the table on a career day or an interview. Then we have this huge problem on the teaching capacity side as well, both in the schools as well as in tertiary higher education, tertiary education. This is also where SLASSCOM with its volunteer teaching programs are working with both universities and other institutions to build teaching capacity. So we're doing 2 things. One is co-delivery, but we're also doing train-the-trainer models. Right? Both models are being done so that we improve teaching capacity. It's very important right now, because as much as we speak about attrition and migration in our industry, the same applies in the teaching world as well. We see record number of people, especially in state universities, where they have this 5-year holiday scheme, which they have happily taken and gone abroad, leaving a big vacuum in the next time. Culminating of all this SLASSCOM was handholding, right? Up until recently, we also as an organization, as much as we have grown and scaled, there are limitations, right? And we felt that we need to have a lot more partnerships and a much more national focus around this. So last November, we launched the National Future Talent Initiative. It's just an umbrella kind of thing to bring all stakeholders in. So both government and private. So we have the ministries and departments, etc., starting from education to everyone, demand side like you and EDPs, foreign ministries, everyone there. Then we have the entire university system and the school systems in there, and the vocational training systems. And from the industry side, we have, and then we have the professional bodies, the BCS, the Computer Society of Sri Lanka, then the CMA, ACC, CS Sri Lanka, AAT, all of those, CFA. Then lastly, the industry, it's now not only SLASSCOM, it's cities and any other bodies which are coming. So we have a CFO, it's being chaired by Madhu here. Yes, we've had a bit of challenges get things moving, but we are now kind of making a very concerted effort into making this a very high-level national program. And you will see in latter part of this year, there are some very headline initiatives that will come around to attract large numbers. So the key objective is to inspire young talent to grow industry, given a very accelerated pathway to join, and also inspire people to teach as well. Some of the big numbers that we wanted to do: attract 500,000 people to have awareness of the industry, 50,000 from the BPO space, look at 5 in-demand talent pools that we need to create, teaching capacity 500, freelancing workforce, as well as increase the number of companies engaged in these programs. That also is a very big challenge. Either companies are not aware of these programs or have a less appetite to engage with the industry to attract talent from these pools. So this is my last slide. I'm setting the stage for the panel discussion to follow. So what are the challenges, right? New entrants, right? So there is, as I said, education, migration, people are leaving even at a student level. How do you give them a flavor of the opportunities here and retain them here? It's definitely, although we have a slightly lower tick on the demand, we still need to do this on a long-term basis. And more importantly, how do you create that positive outlook? Bigger question, we are doing this at a larger scale now. We also need to have the industry sponsors to are we hire. So when I engage with a lot of the companies here, because of the global downturn, recession, etc., they are kind of slowing down. Some of them have even gone to no hire policies, right? Yes, these are temporary, but we need to have some sort of visibility as to when the next hiring cycles will happen. Very important, because when universities are now engaging and when students are going to come out, we need to have opportunities for them, otherwise that will become a disappointment, right? And then also look at how much technology, especially in AI and all that, is going to disrupt also on the employment numbers. As much as we need to rescale, but whether there will be a lesser growth in actual headcounts that we want to hire in the future, right? Then on the experience side, whether the migration is temporary, whether it's reversible, some of these people who went for following the masters, etc., and actually finding difficult out there, whether they would actually come back and how long, right? And what are those conditions to bring them. More controversial, foreign talent, whether you're going to open our doors to attracting foreign talent, right? I was actually after this, me and Dinesh have to go for this education reform presidential task force meeting. The last week was the first one inaugurated, and the president pointed a finger at me and asked me, look, foreign talent, you're always against, right? Your industry is against this. Right from the beginning, I was involved with the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, right, starting from the Indian SEPA, right, back in the mid-2000s. He has said that we are open for foreign talent, okay, as long as it's through a sponsored mechanism. And I just want to lay it out here because there have been a dissenting voice in this. Any foreign or Sri Lankan company, incorporated in Sri Lanka, obviously, if they want talent, regardless of employment salary threshold or qualification threshold, right? We want to be able to give work permits or visas for them to come, right? This is just to have that access to talent to grow faster, and more importantly, also to do the technology transfer. I don't think Sri Lanka as a country, we can have all these technologies within our borders. We need to have that technology transfer as a company. And more importantly, there is also an education hub policy which might also see the light of day after such a long time. Again, if good universities get set up here, it's being set up here for 3 reasons. Number one, curtail the amount of Sri Lankan students going outside, big drain in foreign currency. Attract regional talent to come to Sri Lanka, right? Earning foreign currency, so that they come here. Very much like what Malaysia has done with the British and Australian universities. Thirdly, we need to probably follow a model which things like Singapore does. There they not only just bring them for education, but retain them for employment at least for a period of time. Right? I have several of my cousins who went to NUS and they had to work 3 years in Singapore, right, before they could even get out of that bond. Right? So we need to see whether we can give them some sort of incentive or conditions for education here with employment also built into it. Right? And we are working on the visa regime and everything else around it. Then on the retention, we spoke about tax. There are 2 tracks. One is we have taken an knee-jerk reaction, some of the companies adjusting pay to what is being taxed for our employees. We don't have to call it tax reimbursement, but some adjustment is happening. But this is a serious concern. I mean, every day I will get a WhatsApp or a message or a call asking why isn't SLASSCOM doing anything about this, right? We are, right? Obviously we are tied to certain IMF dictates this time around, but this is an ask, almost on every month with the Treasury Secretary and the Ministry of Finance, etc. What we are asking is what you call relief, income tax relief. So the relief comes from, right now it's the income tax is charged at the top line. Okay, we are asking them certain qualifying payments, maybe a housing loan or an intended housing loan, vehicle loan or an intended vehicle loan, education loan or intended including children, then healthcare. Right? Take these 4 things, allow certain thresholds, but that spend could be on monthly maximum, right? Deducted first, then the residual income be taxed based on the slabs, right? So it's well articulated. We also given data to the Treasury as to how many of our 144,000 or more specifically on the export sector. The number is 79,000 employees, but percentage of them have actually now, because of the reduction of threshold to 100,000, have gone into the income tax bracket, right? And that's a very significant number. We came up with a figure close to about 40 billion rupees as the industry's annual contribution to the tax. And if you had seen the first quarter output from the inland revenue, they have collected close to about 11 to 12 billion rupees of tax in the first 3. So that's about 125 billion intended tax income by a calendar year, and we would probably contribute 30 to 35% of that. Right? And we have the data to substantiate that as well. Unless, of course, our employment numbers and some of the other crazy things some companies are doing affect that number. Then the macro factors, how do you improve, right? There is still a lot of dissatisfaction with the political progress as well as the tax and other inflation, cost of living, all that. Housing is definitely out of reach for a lot of people. Right? Vehicles are not available to purchase, or even if they are, they are going to be out of reach. Interest rates are very high. All these are the macro factors that need to come down for people to have a good lifestyle from their income. Can we actually fast track skills and experience? Right? This is a tough one to answer, because when you say you are going to lose people at 4 to 8 years, okay, is there any way to build 1-2 years into that level? Right? That's just an open question. Right? And then the industry academia engagement. As much as I have shown what it is, it's being done by a very limited number of volunteers and a very limited number of companies that are actually taking part. We actually would like 300 plus general members that we have to be engaged in this, because this is for us, right? Just a handful, less than 30% of this getting engaged seems to be very unfair, right? For people who are actually putting in the effort. So that's why it's required more to scale and also to diversify the skills. Lastly, what are those new skills, roles that we need to look? It's not just internally, we also need to look at global trends. We have done a full study, which I'm also willing to going to share with the membership. We have looked at the World Economic Forum latest report. We have looked at also platforms like Coursera, edX, and Udemy. They have a very good pulse of all the tier countries, what programs are being run, right? And that has a very good mapping of what are the in-demand skills that the talent is following. With that, I will close. My appeal is we are not spamming you. We are sending very meaningful communication. We will rationalize it as much as possible. But do please look at our comms so that you know what is running here. We have now distilled it to a Tuesday afternoon, weekly headlines that will come, that will summarize everything that is there happening on the week and what's ahead. Do have a look at that. That's number one. And number two, in your organizations that HR talent build people, get them to engage with us, right? And they will have a very good feel, and it's also for your own companies, it's a good way to build your talent brand on a long-term basis. Pass the mic on to Chamika to invite the panel for the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashu. Yes.
Sorry, I was taking some notes here. Just one thing is not mainstream, but let me just touch on this, because we see isolated incidents of ethic-related issues coming up in the industry, and then that gets amplified in the social media, right? And more importantly, it's doing a lot of damage to the employees and the future damage. A lot of social media chatter about this industry being a more exploitative industry, earning at one, paying another. Obviously, employment is a different contract, freelancing is a different contract, right? Or entrepreneurship is a different contract. I think these conversations need to happen with our employees and more engagement from the industries as well. We need to build trust, because I'm seeing very clear polarization between this whole employees-employer thing happening in the industry, right? And a few people are taking advantage of this and feeding into this. Some of the trust building activities I've seen is the companies are doing town halls, open town halls with their employees. Some of them invited me and a few other SLASSCOM office bearers to come for that, so that we give an outside perspective. Otherwise, they see the events are our management. So we are really willing to engage with the member companies on this. And lastly, we wanted to bring a code of conduct. I think it's high time we did this and you all sign off with regard to notice periods, pay verifications and things like that. We've had incidents where in India it is kind of now become mainstream where people are holding two, three permanent employments. In fact, so much so that the Provident Fund in India is now pulling up reports and feeding it back to the industry on a monthly basis as to the duplicates. And we've had incidents in Sri Lanka also, this happening. So we need to come as an industry to make it more sustainable. That is not to control employees and things like that. It's for their well-being as well as for the industry's well-being. To bring in a code of conduct, so to speak, so that we all have some sort of a general rule to operate so that we don't damage the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Just to follow on our website, you will find the code of conduct for companies as well as guidelines for employees. It's available there if you want to look at that. So following on from Ashik's presentation on what SLASSCOM is doing in this area, we have some eminent personnel in our panel discussion. Without taking much of your time, let me introduce you to Dinesh Sapramaldu. He, I think, was our first or second CEO of SLASSCOM. He's the chairman of SLASSCOM. He is the co-founder. He's the founder of the study group, and that's the first company from our industry to be listed on the Colombo Stock Exchange. So that's a wonderful opening for our industry. He's also a great proponent of building talent in our industry, and he represents the industry in various government committees as well as chambers. I won't tell you too much. You can go on to everybody's LinkedIn profiles and get more information. Next, we have Madhu Ratnayaka. He's co-founder of Cybers, but he had a long-spanning career at Virtusa, so you probably all know him. As Ashish said, he is the chairman of the NIFTY, the National Future Initiative, Talent Initiative. Then we have Tushara Kaudavatta, he's CEO of Axiata Digital Labs, another eminent personality that I don't need to introduce, had a long-spanning career in the industry. And to moderate the panel discussion, we have Nishan Mendes. He's Vice Chair 2, and from his role at PwC is that he's the Chief Operating CIO, and he also heads the Net Zero initiative at PwC. So, Michelle Marchadu, may I invite all
So, to continue this discussion on the theme of talent challenges and solutions for the IT BPM sector, we have three eminent personalities here with us today. I'm delighted to have two former SLASSCOM chairman and then founding members of SLASSCOM who have joined with us. So no better actually panel to discuss talent. So before I move to the panel, I would like to share some thoughts on talent, just to set the context. We all know that what we offer to our clients is knowledge and skills, right? So, and this is a direct outcome of our talent. 80% of the cost of our organizations is staff related, which shows that talent is the largest asset that we have. And if you list the companies, the industries where the highest percentage of highly paid employees, so that is basically IT BPM industry would be one of the among the top, if not the leader. Right? So this again shows that talent is our largest asset, and then the value we place on them. What Sri Lanka is known for in the industry is for the skills and the quality of our talent. If you look at our the IOI brand, the Island of Ingenuity brand, what does it promise? We say that our talent is creative and flexible. We say they are bold, fearless, and spirited. We say that our talent provides insightful, innovative solutions to solve complex problems. We say we are warm, friendly, and hospitable. So if you look at almost everything that we promise in our brand relates to all attributes of talent. So does this mean that everything is hunky-dory with regard to talent? Is everything positive? Don't we have a talent challenge? So I would like to actually pose the first question to all three panelists. In your perspective, what is actually this talent challenge? Do we have a talent challenge? If so, what it is? And how do you feel that? How has it impacted in your respective organizations? Now, if you can start.
Thanks. I think the talent challenge is not something new, right? All of us have been grappling with this for many years. I think, especially the last few years, what has kind of exacerbated is what Lasanga talked a lot about. The talent has truly become global, right? And I think we've seen that when we are losing people or when we're trying to compete for talent, it's now no longer within the confines of your own country. Then you're now competing with anybody around the world. Especially if you look at the individual contributors, if you look at a senior architect or individual contributor like that, you are no longer competing with people next door. Right? So that's become a huge challenge, and that really drives us to rethink the way we build the leadership talent. So that's, I think, probably number one, which continues to be a big challenge. And I think there are a couple other challenges that when you come to building talent, which is through all remote work that can increase. Number one, out of that is the first one is creating engaging environment, right? Especially creative work that we try to do and getting people together. It's become now difficult. Right? I was just reading. Google is announcing that they want now remote work has become an optional thing, not the default. Right? So I think you see some of that's happening in Tesla and a lot of the other Silicon Valley-based companies. They're trying to now attract people back simply because you can't do a lot of this creative work that easily on a full remote work. Right? And while we are all trying to do it. So that's, I think, the second big challenge. I see, how do you create an environment that you can really take the best value out of creative energy that you can create in a company in a remote setting. And the third piece is really, again, related to the remote work, is learning. Right? And I think in our space, the ability to learn is so crucial. And though the engagement and learning is two things can get disrupted by remote work. Right? So how do you really build capabilities that people can learn and grow in the talent, right? What you have in the company. Those are challenges I think most companies struggle with and trying to come up with new ways of doing that. I would say those are top three for me right now.
Tushar, would you like to share how it has impacted your organization currently, especially during the last 12 to 18 months?
On this talent topic, there are three things we are looking at. One thing is competency, capacity, and the cost. Competency as in, it's not the technology, you were talking about ingenuity, and so we are crafty. In Sri Lankan engineers, we have the craftiness. But we lack is the discipline of doing things. Like in particular engineering discipline, you need three things to be qualified to an engineer, which is your this discipline, and then systematic way of doing things, and then the science behind that. What we lack is this discipline in terms of how to get this done. When you hear, say, Switzerland or Germany or say Italy, there are some trademarks comes to your head, right? It's not only because of the talent, but it's just how you do things. Now, what we are trying to do is how we can bring that discipline into this engineering discipline, that we nurture engineers to do things in a more systematic, predictable manner that creates a lasting experience for clients to feel our engineering has a remarkable difference between what we just do versus what we really produce to the market. The cost factor is, as Madhu mentioned, so the talent is global. But in the most organization in the Sri Lankan context, if you are serving Sri Lankan clients, then affordability is a question. So you are trying to source global talent at a global cost, but serve the local cost. That's a big challenge. How you really overcome that is only the innovation, and bring innovation to increase the productivity, right? Productivity has three angles. One is, can you maximize the output? That's only by doing maybe things in much better. Second, much large impact is through innovation. Is there a way that you can bring new competency or new talent or new technology to deliver more with the same input, right? In our case, input is just time that you spend to produce something out. How we can produce much more, maybe like 3 times, 4 times, or maybe even 10 times of the same input that you take to produce something. So if you look at that, and we are technologists, we need to look at how to leverage technology to support innovation, support maximizing the output that you produce. So when you look at those in our context, the talent challenge is, as I told you, having a capacity to do things. The capacity is not just the plain vanilla technology that you're looking at, right? There are very specific requirements like the cybersecurity, AI machine learning, mobile engineering, and then even new technology, new entrant, which is the prompt engineering, right? So all of these things now we need to look at how we can increase the capacity for that, but not looking at large the quantity, again looking at the competencies with the right capacity at the right cost.
Dinesh, while you answer the same question, I will add another question. See, if you look at the SLASSCOM employability survey, most recent one that we did, it has given reasons for failing to fill the graduate vacancies. Right? So it says that 22% of the respondents have said that there is incompatibility in their soft skills of the graduates, and 34% have in fact said there is the gap in the technical skills. Right? These are the graduates that we are talking about. So, in your perspective, say, and when you talk to the universities, right, the challenges that they have, right, they are finding it difficult to get hold of proper lecturers and trainers. They are having challenges, they are constrained by infrastructure. So, in a situation like this, what are the solutions that you feel that we have with us? And especially you are a great advocate of virtual learning and degrees and all that. So, just to share some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, so thank you. I was just, before I start, I wanted to give a really what Ashik really laid out. I've been involved in SLASSCOM from day one, but I think what SLASSCOM has been doing in the last couple of years has been really great. And I think what is missing is that this information is not really getting out. And I think this once a week program that we're talking about, getting those headlines out, and we need to start engaging policymakers. We need to start going and saying, do you know that we pay 35% of all the income tax that is earned in this industry? So there are a lot of things that we as company builders that start going out and talking and engaging with this to bring this out, because our industry is not recognized enough for us to have that leverage to go and talk. Said that, coming back to the talent part, I think for me, I always look at this from a people that the global mobility is going to happen. People are going to migrate, people are going to go out. It's while we need to educate them about the challenges that they may have and try to see how we can actually get them to be in Sri Lanka, but more than that, I think the key is to increase our supply. So increasing supply is number one, because if you really look at only 40% to 50%, I think, so that's that I was asking you that day. Also, it's of A-level qualified students actually get into all the industries for training, including the universities and all that. So we have
sorry to interrupt, Dinesh, it's actually 65,000. So 30,000 students enter the state universities and another 35,000 into the private. So this is out of a pool of 130,000 qualified.
So you have a large numbers that we have access to, that we need to be able to train and bring in as supplies. So I think that part is something I think with the National Future Talent Initiative and other areas that SLASSCOM is doing is good. But for individually, for companies, what we look at is, okay, yes, we know that when they come out of the universities, they may not have the right soft skills or be able to work. But I think while we go out to universities and encourage them and maybe run programs, I think as large companies, we need to be able to have our own programs. So you bring them through, we actually take them through certain, from orientation, induction, but more put them through training programs. And this, if you really look at, I look at this very closely because we do a lot of work in Japan. If somebody gets into a Japanese majors, with this Fujitsu or NTT, they go through a very structured program before they can become engineers. So I think we need to look at that kind. The issue we have is that you take them through that program and then they say to go after getting all that. So those are the ethics and the things that we need to kind of get them into this, and also to kind of openly discuss. I think a lot of us, we talked about a lot of engagement and things like that, we not like to mention, but what Ashik mentioned at the end, I think is what is more important. We find a lot of people not disciplined enough. Once they start working from remote, the productivity is very low. They may be doing 2-3 jobs. These are the issues that we need to really address and see how we actually kind of mitigate that and talk about. So it's not only one way that we need to look at, but I think multiple. But I think I spoke a lot of things, but we can go to details later.
Sure, thanks, Dinesh. Tushar, we have been, Dinesh was talking about the graduates and how we can improve them. But everyone wants to actually hire graduates. If you look at these audiences, our first preference would be to hire graduates. But we definitely know, Ashik shared the statistics that there definitely is a demand and supply gap. Right? When we have a demand of about 23,000 annually, the supply is only like 13,000 to 14,000. So there definitely is a gap, which means that we need alternatives. Right? So have you tried onboarding non-graduates? When I say non-graduates, it could even mean directly out of people who are qualified, come out of after doing A-levels. Right? Have you tried that model, and how has been your experience? Has it been successful?
If you look at hiring non-graduates, I think you all do, we all do, but we never realize the potential and how we will maximize the workforce. Look at the interns that you hire. They are non-graduates, right? Officially. They are maybe about 2 to 3 years into the studies. And there are actually 2 things inspired me in the recent, I tell you how I did that. When I browsed through the Facebook, then I found a meme that it says the most of the companies run by interns because the interns are actually pulling the weight of the rest. Second one, I think when I was at the previous workplace, I think Sanjeev is here. Sanjeev was a delivery head and running a project, and this project had a start team, but project was going south. He asked me, can you go and have a look? Then I found there's a superstar engineer, 17 years old. He's churning the super code, guided by a wrong person. It's a very senior person, he's guided this to do it wrong. When I put this 2 and 2 together, we have about 90 or over 90 people interns in our organization. How we can maximize them? Because they are competent. Only thing is there's a lack of system in place and also support in place to get the output from these people, right? So we have a model we created using technology. We use a platform called Progress Nexus. You take some of the best practices from freelance, Upwork type of freelancing platform, we mimic similar inside. We get a technology platform. What you need a lot of AI in it. You need to understand this new engineer who has come to my project, taken off this particular task, right, and producing a code, and having these type of issues in the code that he produces, right? And so with that, we were able to actually maximize this, over 90 interns we had, to produce more. Only issue is, in some companies, when you are into more like staff augmentation or maybe providing engineers to organization, this model doesn't work. But if you are measuring or maybe delivering output as a deliverable, then this model really works. So then we went to extend of, can we leverage some of the school leavers? Then we actually, that's also inspired by one of the CEO's son, just passed out of the school and said, hey, he's a good programmer, can we try? Actually, he's the one, you might be using Genie. Some of the capabilities that the peer-to-peer transaction is implemented by this kid. So we are looking at how to onboard these kind of kids to the workforce, but you can't just drop them into a wrong place. Supported, guided, and monitored by the systems.
Sure. So when you say supported by, so do you have a separate, now you have the graduates, you have the non-graduates, when it comes to the training, is it two different tracks that you run, or is it combined, or how do you kind of overcome the challenges in that?
Yeah, I think this is where the trick is. I think you asked the right question, because if you put it isolated training program or isolated program, it's definitely not going to work. You have to get them into the mainstream. Only thing is you have to use the technology platform. As I told you, when the person is assigned, we have the little bit of data, because when you're onboarding a person, you actually, maybe Dinesh knows that you typically have an onboarding process asking your date of birth to qualification and everything. So when I talk about this, the platform we use, feeding into that, and there's a 17-year-old kid taken up this particular task and supposed to produce this particular work because you have Jira and the task is assigned. And then you monitor, you scan the code and monitor what the output looks like and how much it is. What we did was then we created a task force, or maybe the competency heads for each competency track. So as and when the person checks in the code, the dashboard comes in, this progress nexus dashboard, that this person A produced 10 lines of code where he's supposed to be producing maybe more than that, but it has these type of issues, right? It could be cybersecurity, it could be coding related, best practices related, or it could be maybe defects in the code that he produced. Then a particular person comes in and support him, and then assign the LinkedIn, Coursera, Udemy type of modules that you have to go, that also link to the system, right? Now what he does is he goes and take the course, and then actually then you see the progress of improvements. It could be the productivity improvement or the quality improvement, right? Or even the behavior improvement in terms of how frequently that you check the code, how frequently actually do the modification, how frequently you run your test cases, and how much of defects you produce per code that you write. So it's a complete holistic system, not isolated. So the wrong thing we have done in the past is you put them into a classroom or maybe a system and say, oh, you get trained and these are your trainers, and then come and integrate into my project. That is maybe not so productive in my opinion.
Yeah, and a quick point, I think when you go for non-graduates, the key part is how you find the right people, right? I think university and so forth gives you like a baseline because they go through some basic things, right? And I think when you hire, especially people who are, you find like the example he was talking about, the CEO's son, right? Those are the cases, kind of thing, when you go non-graduate, you find somebody has referred you, somebody. So if you can have a mechanism to honor these people, right? In security, you go to things like Try Hack Me, people who are very passionate. You find a lot of people who are very passionate, below the degree radar, right? And it's about really figuring out where these guys turn up and how do you find them. Right? And they're generally non-conventional ways you have to use. Maybe the future careers bridge kind of thing you can use to bring these guys out, right? There's a lot of these people, it does a far better job than an average graduate who's probably because they are just simply motivated and driven, right, and hunger to learn and do things. If you can make it more available for people to find them, right, I think that becomes a big
Sure.
right? You find a lot of great guys.
Sure, good point, Kamal. I think Future Careers Binge is something that you all can actually subscribe to. So if you are not, you have, please talk to corporate finance. They will help you to do that, because you can, as Manu said, you can unearth these brilliant guys who are really passionate and motivated to do real great stuff. Dinesh, moving back to you, see, last 12 to 18 months, attrition has been a major disruption. Lasanga shared, all these attrition related data. So, what has been your global model? When I say global model with regard to talent, have you looked beyond Sri Lanka? I'm sure you have. So, would like to kind of understand how you did that, because that will benefit a lot of the others who aspire to set up operations, overseas operations. And also as Sri Lanka, what can be done, what are the other countries doing right, which we can also learn from those countries. So if you can just share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So I think Senate, not in the last couple of years, but I think maybe about 5-6 years ago, we decided that talent was important from a global standpoint. So what we really did was we actually started going and setting up our own operations. So we have an operation in Bangladesh, we have operations in Singapore, but both we started recruiting both local talent. And recently, in the last 18 months, we said, okay, we want to actually start, that was more from a development and maybe sales marketing, but we wanted to kind of think, okay, we also wanted to look at how we do some, because one of our companies is doing restaurant technology, we wanted to have an outbound team. So what's the best thing, where are the best outbound teams are based, so that's in Philippines. So we started, okay, we'll go and set up an operation. So the experience I'm going to share with you, I think, is something that we all feel that it's very easy for you to go out and set up an operation and get a team going. But I think the amount of work that you need to do to really get that going is completely different from what you would think. Because each country, if you really look at it, has their own way of getting businesses done. So, for example, when we were it took us about 4 years to get Bangladesh operation going, but for Philippines, we are completely different. It was not as simple as we all think. I mean, yes, you go to their BOI equivalent, which is called PESA, you go and talk to them, they say, within 2-3 months that you can get this going, you can get these things. We are almost like 9 months, I think we are still there trying to get things going. But what I'm trying to say is that, what is being portrayed and what is being told is not what we will start going and start working with. So we were now, and the second part, I think, especially in that market, what we realize is, yes, it's a huge BPO market and a lot of sales outbound and stuff like that. But also, employees have gone through this, you talk about the challenges that we have, the challenges that you would find, especially on remote work and in those places, are completely different. And it's very, a lot of these employees have actually knows that when a new company comes, okay, they can actually take advantage of that company. So we went through multiple iterations of trying to understand from recruitment to onboarding to all that. But when you are going, there are two things I can, some things that you can look at. One is for you to recruit a good HR manager. That should be your first job, especially if you are going into, because the practices that we have here, we think it's very easy to recruit a person, let somebody go and do all that stuff. Each country is very different. Especially in Philippines, they have actually what's called DOLE, Department of Labor. They have lawyers to represent employees, not the other way around. We talk about the challenges that we have here, but they have, so for there, you can't even, if a person is, if you are quote unquote, if you really look at the 6 months of probation, you can't let them go within the first 1 or 2 months. You have to really build a case, and only on the 5.5 months only you can let them go. So these are roles that we thought of probation period is this, if it doesn't work, so we recruited about 7 to 10 people at first go, you learn. So what I'm trying to say is that yes, we need to look at outside, but I think we also need to look at how we actually plan that and really have a methodical way of going through. And because we have about 8 officers in other places, sales officers are different from your development centers and things like that. So it's, I think, and then setting up a company, I think that was the other part. So I think Sri Lanka, I think we can get companies set up even with BOI much faster than I think some of the countries they are giving you all these companies with that. Said that, we also started looking at recruiting people from all over the world. Not the setting up operations, but we have with these architects, and especially for Sri Lanka, for companies doing global, one of our biggest challenges is not development. It's more on sales, marketing, we did that, SaaS positioning, marketing. Those were some of the positions that you can't really actually get here. So that talent you can actually get from outside, and for that, I think now I think that we're better now we can recruit people in US and other places. That because of the downturn, there are so much of layoffs going on in these countries that you have access to that. And that I think can help our companies to kind of be able to get that multiplier effect, because it's not the engineering talent that we are looking. We're looking for more expansion talent. And I can maybe talk a little bit about, I think what Ashik mentioned before. I think it's very important for us to start opening when we start doing that. By the time we get the BOI approvals and stuff like that, the talent is gone, because that will take about 4 or 5 weeks getting that. I think if you look at Singapore and most of these other places, when they are success, I think they're being able to attract talent. I'm talking about bringing them to Sri Lanka and working with our own teams, and that's something that we should really look at.
Sure. Actually, that was the next question that I wanted to actually ask. So, Madhu, you also have a India one, right? Where you basically have set up in India. So, was this mainly to manage attrition, or was this for leading those areas where Sri Lanka probably is not yet ready? So, what was the strategy behind that? And also, the next question, bringing resources from elsewhere to Sri Lanka, if you can answer to the two.
Yeah, for us, Skybers, we went to India largely to access to a large talent pool, right? And especially in cyber, there's a mature market there, and there's a bigger talent pool. So that's the reason, because of attrition, we were thankfully very low attrition as a company, especially in the early stages, right? It's 2.5 years old. I think what you need to really figure out is how do you integrate, right? How do you really work with different cultures? How do you work with your leaders are attuned to be able to work with different people, right? And that's where things break down. You can go and access talent to Dinesh's point, but how can you make that work effectively? And I think that's a key part that we are trying to spend time and make sure that people are more diverse, people understand how to leverage diversity. The cultures are very different. So that's I think a big part of making a global organization work. Whatever said and done, there is subcultures, right? And you have to figure out how to make those things work. So that becomes an advantage for the company, not a disadvantage, especially in the country. So these are some of the things I think you have at setting up the company in different countries. But there are also new models like, you have companies like remote.com, multiply.com. You can go and hire a single person from anywhere without having to set up operation, right? These are all employee or record companies. They'll do all the legal compliance, everything for you. You just have to hire the person, it can be from anywhere, right? So I think as companies, we'll have to figure out how to leverage that kind of access to talent. These are things that didn't exist 5 years ago, 3 years ago. So that creates a much better level playing field. But as a company, your core competence should be to be able to work with people from different diverse. If we talk about diversity and inclusion in many forums, and this is really what drives home that point, right? How you really make a global talent pool.
So in your models, right, whether you set it up elsewhere or you bring them down here, that's right. Sure. Thanks, Martin. So I would like to actually open up the floor for questions. If you have any questions, I think we have about 5 to 8 minutes, maybe enough time for 2 questions. Any questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just want to ask. Yeah, I'm audible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I just want to ask because all 3 of you are kind of running global operations now. Usually, traditionally, business used to come from Europe, US, and usually the supply of these services were coming from this part of the world, right? Sri Lanka, India, or ASEAN countries, kind of thing. So, just want to understand is that, and also it's been told that the capital intensive things are now even the moving into the Asia. So, are you really seeing that that trend is changing, right? It's not anymore US, Europe, maybe kind of Europe and other countries are still our customers, and these geographies work as suppliers. That's the first part of it. The second thing is now even these giants like India, China, they're becoming like global, very very strong economies, and we've seen that they're getting involved in some of these brands, and some of these have been acquired as well. So that means they'll have a stronger say. Now what happens is they run the business, at the same time they have the talent pools as well. So in a situations like there are 2 questions there. One is the trend is changing. The second one is, if that's the case, smaller countries like us, what would be the strategy that we should be playing? We should be kind of aligned with an economy like India or China, or should we have our own identity and run as a niche? I would like to ask that question.
Yeah, so I think your question is about where is the demand, I guess, to the extent, right, where the customers are. And for us, I think from our company perspective, we are really looking at multiple geographies. Obviously US and Europe continue to be still a big market. But what we see 2 other bigger markets, emerging markets, is one is the emerging Asia, the Bangladesh to Cambodia and other countries who are really growing very, very fast, and larger enterprises and more established players, they are no different to more developed enterprises. And the second one is the Middle Eastern market, right? I think there's a lot of change there. So these are the markets that we're looking at in addition to the traditional markets of Europe, US that we're looking at. And I think you will see most of the larger global enterprises are across the board, where they are available everywhere. They are operating everywhere. So if we're serving some of those companies, large enterprises, their sourcing also has now largely done out of Asia. Right? You might be working for a US company, but their sourcing arm is in India, for example. Right? So you're really selling to an Indian operation, though the company might be a global bank. Right? So that's also another change that it's not something recent, it's been happening in the last 7-8 years. So I think the markets are becoming a lot more open, at least for us. It's not just the US market or the Europe market. Talent-wise also, I think it's becoming more global. More and more companies are comfortable doing work with remote companies, even a smaller remote setups, right? If your employees are working remotely, even if you're a US company, whether the person is in New York or whether the person is Chennai or straight Colombo, doesn't really matter, right? Because you're not in the office. It doesn't matter if there's a 5 kilometers away or 25, 100 kilometers away. So that way, I think there's a lot more opportunities that comes up that opens up for those kind of companies. Market-wise, those are what we see.
Yeah, I think Sampath, good question, because it captures multiple things, right? US, Europe will be the prominent and dominant markets. There are two reasons. One is their price point is at a premium. But what we see is, in our perspective, since we are providing fintech and telco solutions globally, Africa is an emerging market, South America is emerging market, and also Middle East. So take South America, Africa, and Eastern Europe. Price point is not comparable or maybe competitive as Europe and US. In that case, what typically does is, assume you have 10 AI engineers. Where do you go and prefer to work? US and Europe, right? Because you get the maximum buck out of these guys. In that case, we are not exploring enough of these markets, even though the price points are lower, but you can do much better. This talent we talk about, maybe leverage the right talent at the right price point to serve these kind of markets is one of the best way to attack, because the demand is much larger. These people also lack talents, and then they need some technology solution, innovative technology solution, because the innovation doesn't come from those locations quite often. In our case, we do have those talents. How to really leverage? Only thing is how to really manage this, your EBITDA margin with the talent cost and the what you get paid for. Your second question is okay, now India, China, and also they're also becoming a powerhouse. Is there a play for us? I think definitely yes, because our ingenuity and the creativeness, if we supported that with the behavioral aspects plus the discipline, I think we can definitely come up with some of the creative solutions which we can reach out to this Eastern Europe, African region, and South American region, because they are starving for solutions at a much affordable price, right? So I think those are the maybe mix that we need to really think about providing.
Just to add, I think for Seni, for us actually 90% of our work is not in US and Europe. For HR company, we are in 45 countries, and it's all Asia, Middle East, Africa. And the advantage is that actually, because I think, like I just mentioned, because of our ingenuity and the way that our products are being developed, when you go, you can actually compete at a much, maybe 20 to 25% less than some of our competitors. So we compete with some of the largest in Africa, largest US companies in Africa for HR systems, and the way why we can win is because of the track record and also the feature rich. So I think for looking from especially for Sri Lankan companies, I would say other than the services industry that is mostly looking for Europe and US, if you are a product company, I think your next step should be this part of the world before you go to US, because we have launched a company in US in the restaurant technology, but that was and the kind of competition you get there is actually maybe 50 times more than what we can actually do that in this part of the world. So I think for product companies, that's where the margins are high, and you are able to kind of go from an entry level is low entry barriers with these Middle East and Africa, and especially Africa. We are in about 15 countries in Africa. I mean, it's a great market for Sri Lankan companies, because they are, like Surya mentioned, they are waiting for products with good features, because the ones that they have, they can't afford other than maybe the money.
There is a follow-up, if I may. There's a question about attrition, right? So just something counterintuitive. It's like to get business, sometimes the relationships are very important, right? So, and now most of the talent, everybody's talking about migrations, right, as a reason, maybe the second highest in the industry according to the research they found. So isn't it longer term, it's a good thing, because these guys are moving into these and they are establishing, and probably they'll become CTOs in those countries, and also we create a brand for our own talent, because I've seen Sri Lankans as a better technologies kind of thing. People will be looking more. I mean, the shorter term thing is more dollars coming in as shorter one, but in the long run, don't you think that it is actually beneficial, even though it's a resource crunch for the existing companies at the point in time?
I think that's the way that I've been looking at it. It's not to stop people going, but increase supply. Because I mean, who knows? They may be CEOs of some of these companies. Maybe for maybe 10 years. So I think we should not. Discourage them going, but keep the relationship, and also maybe started thinking about the Sri Lankan diaspora that we actually sometime back. If you really look at India had done this right in tapping into those diaspora to be able to work with their countries. For us, that we have not been able to do that in a meaningful or a scalable way. So I think migration is good. I think we need to, for me, it's like, get million people out of the country is good for the country also. Population.
We need to sort out the supply side. I think we will have time for one more question.
I'm Asif Bandanayak. I'm consultant CTO of Lanka Education and Research Network. I'm also a senior lecturer at the Department of Computer Engineering in Perak. So I'm asking a question from the other side of the talent challenges, because from our side, in the university, we see people leaving very fast. In the last year and a half, we have 6 senior lecturers, professors leaving. The biggest problem is, it is recognized by Ashik and all that, but the biggest problem is not that, the salary challenges and attracting people coming in. Because a couple of years ago, we had a lot of plans to increase the supply, increase our production, introducing a lot of new degree programs, and also producing graduates in different tiers, so that you can actually go to not hundreds but thousands of graduates in different tiers. So we had a lot of plans. Now all are cut back because people are leaving very fast. Just to give you the reality, with 20 years of experience, more than 20 years of experience, including Silicon Valley, my salary is, the fresh graduates are getting twice as much or more than what my salary is currently. So this is the biggest problem. As Madhu said, you can get talent from everywhere, but there's a base level for graduates coming in, and we are also trying to do a lot of things to improve it. But with the rate things are going on, we are in a very, very big problem. So what do you see? So we are actually, I raised this with Ashik and Arjuna during Nifty launch as well. We really need to ensure that there's some sustainability in the short run at least, because getting universities from things from outside, we can do that, but the short run, the short term, we are in a big trouble. So what can be done from the industry side and from SLASSCOM side to ensure that we will keep this, at least we sustain at a certain level until we come out of this?
I can just give one suggestion that we talked about it maybe many years ago of attracting people coming back. The way that we were doing that part was that I think with the universities to have a certain amount of, they do certain amount of lecturing, but they were also to be able to work with industry companies, we have done that with, we haven't done recently, with them becoming doing certain amount of consulting work. So you actually complement that, and that was something sometime back, maybe about 5 years back, we were actually doing that. But that was not an organized program. I think few companies did that. But if there is something like this, I think we should do a very much of a organized way, because most of those lecturers or senior lecturers can actually maybe work 1 day a week with one of the private companies. So you can actually complement the current challenges you have on that.
Yeah, I think
this is the irony of our education system, right? And obviously, so if you look at the schools, also we don't have good people going to teaching, right? And same with IT and other technology areas. It's just gonna destroy the industry at some point, right? If people are, all the best guys get out and don't go back to teaching. So we have to, I think, make sure that education doesn't have to be cheap, but it has to be affordable, right? And there's no shortcut than paying lecturers the right salary, right? I think if you're paying half the salary of a fresh graduate, that's not going to go anywhere, right? Then obviously the best guys will never come to universities or education institutes. So the answer, I think the answer is already found in other places, right? If you go to US or Australia or in these countries, education was cheap, but it's affordable to everybody because it's given on a loan scheme, right? And everybody, if you're getting good jobs, paying double the salary that a lecturer is getting, you can always pay it back, right? So we have to get into some kind of model like that where we can pay the right amount for education so that lecturers can be paid well. At the same time, that doesn't exclude people who don't have money getting into access to education, which is really student loans, right? It's a proven system that has been there for years, right? So we have to get probably better at that, make sure that we provide even some of the public education we have. Instead of giving money to the university, why don't we give it to the student? They'll pick the right place and then pay it back, right? Instead of trying to give. So I think we have to really have a very structural focus around this. While we can do short-term things to fix this, if you don't pay our teachers and our educators well, then you can't build a knowledge economy.
Thanks, Madhu. So before we conclude, actually one last question, just probably you can take a minute and answer this. Who does the demand landscape look like? Lasanga shared some statistics saying there's a 25% demand for the next year, but then what Ashik showed was like when we now go and talk to these companies, it shows the other way around. What does the demand landscape look like in Sri Lanka, at least for the short to medium term?
Yeah, I think globally it's a bit of a lull period, I guess, right? Global recession is looming, and I think you will see demand will be slightly lesser compared to what people were seeing. The good news is when you come to technology, when the recessions and other pressures comes in, while there is a little bit of a lull, then people start using technology to reduce costs, right? And really start automating and things like that. So that will kick in, I think, right? And while you see some short-term slowdown, which most companies are facing, and eventually you start. Technology is one way you can actually come out of recession, right? So that people will spend money on those things that will come in.
Yeah, I think with the recession coming in, so digital transformation is the way to survive for any enterprise, right? So what we see is these digital transformation skills, like your consulting skills, AI, machine learning, data engineering, and then more like modernizing legacy without throwing away the assets are being demanded. That's largely come from these regions I talk about, the Africa region, South America, Eastern Europe. With that, I think AI is taking up very big. Most of the companies that we are dealing with, they're asking, we got first 2 requests for prompt engineers. Now we're actually looking at developing prompt engineering. Data engineering skills are actually how to kind of like use the existing data lakes and then use the data analytics. There are multiple things comes in that AI engineering. So capacity demand is very high. So for example, even we do have about close to 100 data engineers and AI engineers. The demand what we see for next 2 years is about doubling that. Digital transformation skills, as I told you, is demanding. And there's a projection of about 500 requirements in the next 3-year plan for us, right? When you look at that, but you don't get that many people in the market for these kind of fields that we're looking at. What you get is plain vanilla, maybe software engineers and QA engineers. We need to look at some of the skill development program, talent development program, or will be mechanism that I talked about earlier, how to really get those people engaged into the systems and nurture that and develop that with them. So again, demanding skills are like digital transformation, AI, machine learning, prompt engineering is the areas that we are looking at. And importantly, the cyber security. Everywhere I see exploitation happens, and even people are looking at how to kind of hack into the systems because the data is everywhere, right? The people are actually exposed to larger social media platforms. With that, that imposes a lot of vulnerabilities for enterprises. And you have enough cases, right? Even like maybe last few months, even Office is being hacked. Right? Then the cybersecurity is another big area. What we see is in high demand. Even looking at the engineer skills, how to really protect DevSecOps process, right? And it's not just the DevOps, but DevSecOps is in a very high demand area.
Very much bullish on the landscape, but I think also the skill sets will be changing. It's not going to be what we've been doing currently, so the skill sets, so we need to make sure that our universities and our tertiary education, they align themselves to what is needed. I mean, if you look at recently what Google did, they just open source all their, AI training, but they expect that they are going to be, like thousands of people that are needed. So I think the elephant in the room is, what's going to happen with the generative AI stuff, with those replace the current programmers and all that stuff. But I think while it's going to happen for those vanilla part, I think the areas that you are going to do from analytics to data engineering, and that will actually increase more. So, but a good thing is because of mathematical and our whole, way that systems are being built, I think we can really take leverage out of that and kind of create something like that.
Thanks, Dinesh. So with that, we will conclude today's discussion. Madhu, Tushara, Dinesh, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing fabulous thoughts, and all of you, thanks for your active participation. Have a nice day, and God bless you all.
Thank you to the panel. May I invite Shivani Sivararatna, SLASSCOM Director Operations, to hand over token of appreciation to our panel and moderator when they are stepping down from the stage, and to Lasanga as well. And while that happens, may I invite Arjun Anakara, SLASSCOM Board Director and Board Lead for the capacity program, to give the vote of thanks.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Sri Lanka is a very interesting place. You get a cane basket, put a bit of soil, mix it with water, and you take off the residue. You're going to find some stones, okay? And you shine the stones, you're going to find gems. This is how I looked at Sri Lanka when I came and set up GTA, and it worked for us. We are going through the second phase of expansion. While all these problems are there in Sri Lanka, so you've got to look at it with a very positive spin. If you don't disrupt the rest of the industry and try to figure out your own growth and coexist, there is a positive story. At the end of the day, it's still a very competitive place for good talent and to run global business and maintain global standards. So, if you want to find gems, the story was very well articulated, how SLASSCOM and other national bodies, they get together, and how they create this story and narrate a strategy for Sri Lanka was well narrated by Ashik. So thanks for that on stage. And we also had a lot of insights from a wonderful panel. So I would like to thank the panelists, Dinesh, Madhu and Tushara. And also moderating it, Nisha, was very nicely done. So those insights are very, very good to take decisions and take our organizations forward as leaders. I've done this with Lasanga. It's not easy collecting stats from the industry and doing a report. Thank you very much for doing that, Lasanga, and wonderful statistics about our industry. That will definitely give us some insights to plan ahead. We've got sponsors to run this event. Without them, we wouldn't have been here. So we got 2 platinum corporate sponsors, LSCG and Dialog. Thank you very much. We've got a gold sponsor, Mireka Towers, at this event. Thank you very much for them as well. We got the SLASSCOM corporate office managing this wonderful show. They do this very regularly, bring out a very prominent topic which is important for our business and how we steer Sri Lankan businesses forward. So it's not easy to put together such an event in such a short time. So we need to thank them for that action behind the scene. And Jetwing, my apologies, Jetwing for bringing this event with such a touch of elegance, with a breakfast for CEOs. But last but not least, for all the participants, if not for you all, this event is not a success. So all of you are very busy. Some of the members of this audience, they are like people who are right at the top of organizations, senior members, coming to an event like this, endorsing and taking something back so that it's helpful for you all, for your day-to-day life and strategic planning is quite an insightful thing. So thank you very much for being here and supporting the event. SLASSCOM organizes events like this. We regularly keep in touch with the industry. We do a lot of capacity building, we do promote a lot of events, we engage with our members quite often so that this IT BPM industry as a whole becomes a very prominent force in the Sri Lankan economy. So do stay in touch, keep a close connect with SLASSCOM. If you want to have more details on what we do in the future, please do connect with the corporate office, Chavinda's team. And with that, I like to end the session. I wish you all the best. Have a nice day. Thank you very much.